Good morning. Let's go ahead and get started. All right. I want to welcome all of you to attending Higher Ground's Live 911 Tech Talk today. My name is Jake White. I'm from Higher Ground, and we're the company that created the patented Live 911 technology that has the capability of live streaming 911 calls, and they're being used in real-time crime centers, sending them to patrol officers, drone as first responder programs, and even fire departments. So I want to thank you for attending today's session. And I'd also like to encourage you to post any questions that you may have throughout this presentation. There's a QA tab on your screen there. There's also a chat tab, so feel free to use either one, and you can just put those in at any time while we're speaking, and we'll address them for sure at the end, but possibly even during our discussion today. And lastly, we will email you the recording of today's webinar after we're finished, so you can share that if you'd like with any of your colleagues. So new technology have paved the way for expanded police operations, such as drone as first responder programs and the creation of smart centers. And today we will feature Santa Monica Police Department. So our speakers are Chief Ramon Batista and Sergeant Derek Leone. Chief Batista was born in Los Angeles and grew up in Tucson, Arizona, where he began his enforcement career with the Tucson Police Department in 1986. And then in 2021, he returned to the LA area and was sworn in as the 18th police chief for Santa Monica Police Department. And Sergeant Derek Leone has been with Santa Monica PD for 23 years. And during his career, he's been assigned to a variety of investigative units. In 2016, he became a commercial drone pilot, and he was one of the founding members of the SMPD's Unmanned Aircraft Systems Unit. And most recently, he built out the drone as first responder program and is now heading up the development of Santa Monica PD Smart Center, which is their future real-time crime center. So good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Jake.
Thank you so much for attending and participating in our Tech Talk series. Chief Batista, let's get started. I always like to lay the groundwork just a little bit of, can you tell us about the size of your agency and a little bit about the community that you serve?
Sure. So the Santa Monica Police Department is a police department that is very diverse. Our total staffing at full staffing is around 440 professional staff and sworn, and our department is almost equally 51% staff between sworn and professional staff. Our professional staff, the vast majority of them, work in some kind of uniform capacity, whether it's traffic enforcement or public service officers or harbor safety officers. We're a very diverse department, as I just mentioned. About 33% of our staff is female in uniform. Our sworn female officers make up about 14% of our department. We are in a community that is about 8.5 square miles with a population of about 93,000 that throughout the year swells up and down with about 8 million annual visitors. We've got a host of hotels with about 3,500 rooms available. We're also known as Silicon Beach. The Rand Corporation is here. We've got a lot of technology hubs that are also in the area. It is a very busy destination point internationally and of course nationally. I-10 ends here at the historic Santa Monica Pier. So Route 66, I-10, they all finish here in Santa Monica. So we are definitely a destination location.
And with that tourism built in and high profile city, are there special challenges to policing that may be unique to your city?
Well, it is a very well-informed community, a very young one as well. The median age is about 39 years old, and the median household income is almost at about $100,000 per household. It can be a very challenging environment. It's also a very progressive city. So we deal with a lot of issues. It is a beautiful location. So not only do we have a lot of tourism, very well-informed residents, but it's also a place where at times we do deal with a lot of First Amendment protected speech activity, protests of one sort or another. So it is always a very busy city in the right in the umbrella of Los Angeles, the greater Los Angeles area.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for laying that groundwork. And Sergeant Leone, after, launching your air support unit in 2020, you developed and deployed the third DFR program in the state of California. Since its inception, do you know how many tactical DFR, flights you have flown? And I was curious, what are the typical kind of calls that you respond to?
Yeah, so we ran the numbers this morning, and so to date we've done, this is since November 2020 when we started the Drone First Responder Program, 4,562 flights, and of those flights, because we often respond to multiple calls, we've done 5,185 calls, and of those calls we were first on scene 4,586 of those times. So really, what Live911 does to leverage us and get us on scene a lot quicker. So 3,598 of those 4,562 flights and 5,100 calls were prompted by Live911. So we didn't have it at the very beginning. We actually went a couple months in the program without Live911 as a launch pad, and then once we got it on, we started tracking those stats, and that's what we've done since. And then amongst those stats, we were able to 353 times we were either directly assisted or the result of our response was taking someone into custody.
That's a lot. You're getting a huge call volume. You mentioned one thing. This is interesting because most folks that I've interviewed before started their DFR program with Live911 deployed right at time of launch. So you're in an interesting situation that you started before and after. Can you tell me a little bit about how different it was being able to, be able to hear the calls live and also see the location of the calls before and after, I guess?
Yeah, it was definitely revealing seeing the difference, because when you first start the program, you're looking for what's your mission going to be? Where's your call volume going to come in and get you on scene, and what is it you're going to respond to? But once Live911 came on board, you could see as the call comes in. I don't know how many people are actually familiar with the platform, but when you first get the call come in, the audio pops up, and immediately you see a location. If that person moves, you can see the plots on the map move. So as soon as you hear the call, the voice of the person, you see the location. We could conceivably launch just based on the tone of the person that's speaking and be heading to the location where they're calling from. And a lot of calls that before might not seem like a big deal, like someone trespassing or looking over a fence, and they would go into the pending queue, we hear those come in. So we can send the drone to those. And quite often they've resulted in them actually being prowlers, us catching them on the property, being there way in advance of everybody else, and be able to set up a perimeter and coordinate the response when normally that call would have been sitting in the pending queue.
Wow. That's great. Thank you. I'm sure that many people that are attending today have signed up because they're interested in setting up a DFR program. And again, you were on the fronting edge of that in the state of California and even nationally. Do you have any, tips or best practices that you could share with somebody who's getting ready for that endeavor?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, finding your mission and what you're going to respond to is going to be part of that process. That's kind of the response package that you're going to use when you're responding to calls. And then there's the technology side, which is a big one. Having your ISD, your IT folks on board with you as you triage, not only bringing the program on board technologically, but your use case, how you're going to interact with the system, whether it's going to be via a headset, and you're also listening to the radio. So having those IT people on board with you to find those solutions in real time is huge. And we didn't at the beginning, so it was difficult for us. We followed in the model of other departments who have been using it. As most people know, DFR was kind of conceived by Chula Vista down in Southern California. we were responding to calls just from our roof without the teleoperation platform early on. Just, hey, let's go launch to some calls. So we were doing DFR. We just didn't know it was a thing. And then, yeah, once Live911 came on board, you got to integrate the technology. Having those people next to you is huge. And then also communicating with your dispatchers and getting them on board. There's a little reticence usually when you bring on a platform like this, because you're now listening in on calls and taking action on those calls, not only by launching the drone, but getting on the radio. So the concerns that dispatchers express, you want to get ahead of that and kind of bring them on board and explain to them what your purpose is, that your purpose is to respond to calls more efficiently, not as a critique or a criticism of their product, because it's a difficult job what they do. And I learned a lot about
Good.
that.
Good point. That's great. That's good to hear how overcoming those barriers for entry, especially with dispatchers. Chief Batista, let's go back just a little bit because I know that you brought basically Live911 technology to Santa Monica Police Department, but I'm just curious, how did you how did you learn about or hear about Live911, and what was the value that you saw in it?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of departments across the country, we are like everybody else. We are working to staff ourselves up to the right amount of personnel that we need to do the work. And we are conducting our own staffing study in order to get ourselves to have a good understanding as to what the needs are across the organization. But in the interim of that, we know that it's going to take a long time with financing and everything else in order to get ourselves to the place we need to be. So in the interim, we've been looking across the country at a lot of technology solutions in order to help us meet the moment today while that staffing is coming, right? The ability to recruit and hire and retain folks. So in the process of that, I came across Live911 and the software and what it could do. And I'll tell you that from the moment I started to realize what this could do, I was very, very interested. And so I took the initiative to make contact with the company, and then started the conversation of how we would be able to integrate it into our systems. And it did, just as Sergeant Leone described, kind of was coming online at about the same time that we were deploying the drone as a first responder. So it was a perfect match for that. But just to answer the question, it really came about from looking at the entire landscape of technology and law enforcement and trying to figure out what was really going to work for us. And then from there, taking the proactive steps to have a conversation with the company and get the demonstration. By the way, the company was really great. Your company allowed us to test run the software for a couple of months to see if it was really going to work with our systems. And in that period is like what Sergeant Leone talked about. We were integrating it with our dispatchers and our officers. And I got to tell you that from my perspective of being a longtime cop, the idea of being able to hear a caller speaking to 911 and then listening to the translation of the dispatcher to the officers and what that sounds like, I mean, to me, it seemed like a no-brainer that we needed something like this for all of the officers that are kind of leaning into and trying to be on top of things as they're unfolding. Because we all know, right? We've all been dispatched to calls that when we arrived looked nothing like what the original dispatched call sounded like. But here, you're listening to the caller describe in their own words what they're going through. And as police officers, like, we have a pretty good ear to recognize the signs and symptoms of something that's unfolding, where we need to go now versus waiting for it to get dispatched. And I know it's just a matter of seconds, a minute or two, but in that minute or two, you can really make a difference. And I think Sergeant Leone might have touched on a couple of the wins that we've had, but it's more than a couple. It's been many where we get on top of a scene because we first heard the call coming through on Live911, and it is just absolutely fascinating to watch the software work.
Yeah, a lot of people that when they listen to these tech talks, they really love to hear real live examples. And now that you've successfully deployed that and you've seen, do you have any specific examples, either of you, of where maybe Live911 helped get you quicker or more situational awareness and increased situational awareness that helped produce better outcomes?
So I have one off the top of my head. I think Sergeant Leone's got another one that was a much more vicious assault that was unfolding as the call was happening. But the one that I can remember was a vehicle break-in in progress. We heard the caller as the call was coming out, immediately launched the drone, and we were overhead listening to still the description of what was occurring. But even then, by then, the drone operator was already on top of it and then doing the work of bringing in additional units in a way that would best help us corral or block off the most accessible points of egress or ingress for the suspect if he was going to run away. And that proved super successful, because by the time everything was set into place and they made contact, there was really nowhere for the person to go after we started to make contact, because obviously the officers were all around. And that's one simple example of a situation of a car break-in that's being described by the caller that immediately caught the attention of our officers. And I think Sergeant Leone's got one of an assault, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. So, yeah, I mean, like I was saying before, 88% of the time now with Live 911, we're first on scene when we respond for DFR. And there was one particular incident last year where Live 911 call comes in and they're describing, a witness described just a fight. And it's over by one of our areas where we often get some trouble over by the freeway. It's about 3 blocks from the station. And my drone pilot, Officer Lashley, was able to launch right away from the Live 911 call, just hearing that there was a fight in progress. Nothing, no mention of the seriousness of it, but he got up, and with DFR and with drones, you don't necessarily have to be there before you can see what's going on. So he's able to zoom in right away and see in progress the fight occurring. Now, they were trying to reach the RP at the time, but there was no answer on callback, no name left. So we had a phone number, which turned out to be a dead end later on. But they initially saw the fight. The fight moved around the corner. When Officer Lashley got on scene so quickly, he could see that they were beating the guy in progress. 2 suspects, 1 victim in the middle of the street. There's nobody else around, kind of in a commercial area. The suspect went down and went unconscious. The victim went down and went unconscious. Suspects flee, and now the drone ended up being the only witness to the crime, because even the victim was out cold and couldn't describe his assailants. So the only witness to that assault with a deadly weapon was the drone, because it was able to get on scene so quickly. So that's just it's a perfect example of those seconds, mere seconds, because he was looking from the launch pad and could see what was occurring. By the time he actually got over scene, the suspects were already fleeing. So there would have been no witnesses. There would have been no ability for the victim to describe it. And that's just the leverage you get with that quick of a response.
Jake, I almost forgot to tell you about one of our officers is a canine officer. Of course, the canine officer's not tied to the regular calls for service that come through the dispatch center. He is always on top of all the calls as they're starting to unfold. And other officers finally came up to him asking him, "Hey, how is it that you are always like literally Johnny on the spot when these calls are coming out?" And he's like, "I've got this software where I can hear the calls before they're being dispatched. I'm listening to the caller calling into 911. So when I hear something that sounds like it's the real thing, I start heading that direction." And like, oh, so again, right, our operational readiness, our ability to meet the moment and be there for our residents or a victim of a crime has just been significantly improved with Live 911.
Thanks for sharing those stories. Those are really good and diverse. Those are some new ones too that I haven't heard in a while. So that's really great. Just real quick, for those who are listening, feel free to put your questions in, because we're going to get to those in a second. But I want to talk, Chief Batista. I know you're in the process, both of you, of rolling out the Smart Center, and funding always seems to be a major concern in doing that. And in previous tech talks, we have people who have used COVID relief funds or other creative ways to fund that. And I know it's a big budget item. Can you tell us just a little bit about how you funded this center that's being built out right now?
Yep. I feel extremely fortunate to have such a dedicated team. So in 2023, the state of California rolled out a grant opportunity across the state. It was 250 million dollars that were dedicated specifically to battling the issue of retail theft here in the state. We, as a city like Santa Monica, we definitely have an issue with that. And I had recognized the importance of real-time crime centers emerging across the country. And I just felt that this was our opportunity to leverage those grant dollars in order to initiate our own real-time crime center. Our crime center is going to be called the SMART Center, and it stands for Santa Monica Real-Time Crime and Analytical Center. It is a $6.2 million grant that we were awarded in 2023. And we are set to open the doors, I think, in the first quarter of 2025, with groundbreaking occurring, we hope, early January, late December, early January, 2025.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
And Derek, I know you've traveled all over the country looking at other models. And when we spoke earlier, it was interesting because you had said everyone's different. Can you tell us a little bit about your process of looking at all these new advanced technologies, deciding and procuring the ones that are just going to fit your needs?
Right. Of all the centers I've seen, everybody has their own approach and their real-time response package. I mean, you have all of your technology that's out there in the field that you're going to use. It's not just drone first responder, but it's your cameras, it's your license plate readers, and all that is being brought into one center, which is the concept of the real-time crime center, right? Along with your analytics and your research that you can do. But of all the centers that I've seen, everybody just employs each tool differently, and they rely on some tools more than others. So, for us, the real-time response package is going to be the most important because we're just under 9 square miles, and we can respond anywhere in the city with the drone. And our response time, I mean, the max it's going to be at the eastern city limit is probably about 1.5 minutes once we get the call in. But now we're building out the camera network as part of this grant. So now we're going to go from a potentially 90-second response time at the extreme to literally almost zero. So if the Live911 call comes in and I have a location, we can pull up our camera in that area and be eyes on scene within a few seconds. So that situational awareness is going to be even more rapid. And from there, you start grabbing intelligence, which then needs to be exploited with your databases, with your ALPR systems, with your contacts that are in your CAD, with other agencies. All that stuff can start happening within 5 seconds of not the call being dispatched, but the call coming in. And so that's going to completely change the way we do things. We're already working that in some capacity to get our workflow down. But as much as the technology pieces of each center that I've seen are important, establishing what the workflow is going to be. What's the job of each seat that you have in that center? How are they going to interact? How are they going to communicate within the center and without? So all of these things are, when you see from each center you go and visit, they do things a little bit differently, and they have a different philosophy behind it. And then it's just building your own that fits your policing culture and fits your department.
Great. Yeah. Thanks. Gosh, we could go all day. I'm just going to put this up and answer a couple quick questions because I know we're getting short on time. Let's jump into some questions real quick, but I just wanted to mention, here's my contact information. Anyone, please feel free to, contact me with any questions you have. If I can't answer them, I'll point you in the right direction. Sergeant Leone is agreed and volunteered to also take any questions you have if you're setting up your drone as first responder program, or you're starting your smart center in this case, or real-time crime center. Feel free to ask him any questions to help out. He's said for sure. Let me jump into some questions. I don't know if you want to answer this, either of you, but what type of drones and software do you use is a question that came up.
So we are DJI product centric. We have all of our operating platforms are DJI products of various sizes. We get the big ones to the small ones, indoor platform, to the medium size, to the big Mavic Matrice 300, which is what we use for the DFR platform. And we are going to try to branch out to get some other type of products in there that we can get familiar with. But at this point, they're the best ones for our mission, and they work really well. Our teleoperation platform that we use to actually fly the drone remotely is Motorola Cape, and we've been using that since the beginning, and always open to looking at other products. We have looked at a lot of different ones, and at this point, that's the one that works for us. But there's a lot of good products, and it's really exciting for not only the Real-Time Crime Center, but drone first responder, that there's a lot of competitors out there now. So it's but that's what we use right now since the beginning.
Great. Chris has asked, operating and funding model is awesome. Staffing is still a challenge. How are you approaching that? And are veterans with UAS experience an option?
So yeah,
I know, Chief, you had, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Chief.
No, Derek can go with it. We built in the ability to use outside contractors, so that we're not reliant on our sworn staff to do it. We still obviously need a sworn manager, the lieutenant, to oversee the center with probably 2 sergeants, but we're going to opt to use contractors in some capacity.
Right, and
Derek,
a lot
you
of
want
that,
to add? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of that is we want to aim to have a sworn officer or some sworn personnel in the room at all times, because most of the evidence is going to be captured on video, but what you put out over the air can lead to actions in the field, and we want somebody to be able to testify to what it was that was put over the air and why, and what the analysis was, the experience that was drawn on. So for courtroom testimony, we always want to have someone that's sworn in the room. We are working on a model of, yes, we talk to agencies that place retired sworn police officers, military. We're looking at private contractors. We want to go to our retired base that already has knowledge of the city, the layout, the geography, the ability to communicate over the radio. So, I mean, a lot of people look at, oh, do you need to be a pilot and have piloting skills? It is important because you're operating within the airspace, but you're not really flying. We kind of mentioned this before, that you're not really flying the drone from this perspective. The technology protects you from objects, and you're really operating a excellent pole camera in the sky. So the ability to communicate, have situation awareness, tactical knowledge is even more important than the ability to fly a drone. Our guys out in the field deploying drones are actually really flying them, and that's higher risk because they're not working with all the technological situational awareness that we have in the room when you're doing teleoperation. So yeah, but we have been looking at all different business staffing models, from retirees to contractors to retired dispatchers, all up and down the gamut.
Right. Thanks. Chief, on just a sidebar from a previous discussion that we had spoken to, resourcing the whole agency in general with officers has been a challenge. You had mentioned, like, in the last 2.5 years, you've increased by like 60 officers. How did you do that?
Well, it was just full speed ahead with our recruiting effort. We went through a pretty dry spell in 2020 and 2021 where we only hired maybe less than 10 folks in that period, but we lost a tremendous number of people, especially in 2020 when a lot of folks retired, and then that continued on to 2021. So we were filling vacancies that had been just left unfilled for a couple of years. So over the last 3 years, we've hired about 60 new officers, but we're still not at full staffing. So our full staffing number is 232 sworn, and as of today, I just checked, we were at 213. So the challenges continue to get ourselves to full staffing. California is a state where there are a lot of agencies that are offering hiring bonuses. There is a nearby city that is offering $100,000 lateral sign-on bonus to join their department. So it gets tough to compete in this environment. Our department has not offered any hiring incentives. It is simply the opportunity to be a part of this organization, work in this city, in a department in a city that is very well compensated and taking care of the employees. in a pretty good way. So we capitalize on that and keep working hard, but we're not at the stage of offering any of those types of hiring incentives yet. Thank God, thank goodness.
Thanks. Back to some Q&A. Let's make this our last question. It says, is there a reason why your real-time center is managed by sworn as opposed to professional?
Either one of us can take that one. I'll tell you that from my perspective, and I think the Sergeant Leone touched on it, is that I feel that I want to be able to have that understanding of a sworn officer that has had those lived experiences in the field and recognizing and making a connection with the urgency of things as they're unfolding. I'm not saying that it can't be done by professional staff, but our comfort level, my comfort level, I'll be honest with you, it's my decision, is that I'd like to have a sworn member that is in the unit that is leading it at all times, and that is under the control of a lieutenant with oversight of a sergeant. And Sergeant Leone can take it as well from there.
Yeah, I mean, you have the real-time response portion, but you also have the investigative portion of the center. When there's downtime overnight, we're going to be doing a lot of investigative support, pulling video timelines, searching databases. So you're really acting as an investigator, and we wouldn't be opposed to and we will be integrating civilian personnel to do that. But someone that we're going to put in the center is going to have a lot of those, been worked in those units, worked in investigations. They've been out on the street. They have contacts out there in the field. So it's just a huge benefit right now. I'm sure in over time, and we will have a lot of components of civilian personnel, but that oversight and presence of a sworn person, like I mentioned before, just for the testimony. I mean, if we go to preliminary hearing, they can testify in a preliminary hearing in California. A sworn officer could, but a civilian couldn't, and testify, under one of our propositions that allows the officer to testify for what they heard or for hearsay. So it's just a different power that they have in courts, and then just that ability to articulate what it was you put over the radio and why the officers took action based on what you put over the radio, and that's based on your training experience. So a lot of that, if a retiree was a civilian and had that experience, that'd be a great person to put in there as well, I think.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for submitting those questions. This is really good, and that's what this series is all about, is to try to educate and to inform. And thank you, Chief Batista and Sergeant Leone. You were incredible guests, and thanks for sharing with us your experiences, not only with Live911, but with developing your Drone as First Responder program. And I wish you the best of luck with your new smart center after the holidays. We'll check back in with you and see. But thank you again for your time today. Thank you for joining, everyone. On behalf of everyone at Higher Ground, we look forward to seeing you on our next Tech Talk. So have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Good luck.
Thanks.